Now, even as the scars of Pahalgam terror attack continue to bleed, the world is once again witnessing an attempt by the Western media to systematically downplay the ideological and religious motives behind the attack. Instead of labeling the perpetrators as terrorists, many reports referred to them as militants or gunmen and described the incident as a shooting rather than a terror attack. In its coverage of the Pahalgam terrorist attack in Jammu and Kashmir, the New York Times described perpetrators as militants and gunmen and referred to the brutal massacre of 26 innocent lives as a shooting instead of the heinous terror attack that it was. Now, this has provoked strong criticism from the U.S. government, with the U.S. House Foreign Affairs Committee publicly rebuking the New York Times. The committee shared an edited version of the NYT headline on social media, replacing militants with terrorists in bold red, and declared that the attack was unequivocally a terrorist act, criticizing the newspaper for being removed from reality when reporting on terrorism, whether in India or elsewhere. But it's not only limited to the New York Times. Major Western media outlets, including BBC, CNN, Reuters, and The Guardian, are facing intense criticism for their coverage of the recent Pahalgam terror attack in Jammu and Kashmir. Critics argue that by using neutral or softened language, Western outlets obscure the true nature of such attacks and fail to acknowledge the ideological motives, especially when the victims are religious minorities. So this is the fakery which is now being exposed. What is the charge against the Western media? Charge 1 is of downplaying terrorism. Charge 2, selective language that has been used to obfuscate the truth. Charge 3, hide victims' religious identities. That's what they are attempting to do. Charge 4, they've called terrorists militants instead of terrorists. And charge 5, that this is a deliberate erasure. Now, the Hindu-American Foundation, in a sharp rebuke, accused the Western media of deliberate erasure of the anti-Hindu nature of the massacre. Suhag Shukla, HAF's executive director, alleged that the Western media delivered another masterclass in whitewashing, gaslighting, false equivalencies.
A Lashkar-e-Taiba offshoot took credit for storming a meadow in Pahalgam and murdering at least 26 tourists, seeking out Hindus with chilling precision. The headlines should be simple: Hindus massacred in Kashmir by Islamists in a terror attack claimed by a Pakistan-backed terror group. But what do we get from the New York Times, Washington Post, CNN, BBC, Reuters, and AP? Another masterclass in whitewashing, gaslighting, false equivalencies, and revisionist history. Across the board, you'll see patronizing sneer quotes around terror attack and sanitized references to the killers as militants. A militant targets the state, and a terrorist deliberately targets and kills civilians to spread fear for ideological or religious aims.
Well, the attack has drawn widespread condemnation from global leaders, including U.S. President Donald Trump, who called it an act of savage hatred, and Vice President J.D. Vance. But the Western media seems to have an agenda of its own. Just take a look at the contrast in the language that has been used by the Western media. Let me first go across to Rishabh for more on this. Rishabh, the Western media has been accused of downplaying the entire attack by using words like militants, by attempting to hide the identity of the victims. What they're essentially doing is they're essentially downplaying terrorism, calling it a shooting, not a massacre, not a terror attack.
Well, when it comes to Western media, with no ground presence here in India or in the conflict zone, and sitting in Washington, sitting in New York, sitting in London, when they report on issues like this, and especially issues which are so sensitive, by washing away or softening their headlines, they tend to do a disservice to journalism, and that's what has been called out by the Foreign Affairs Committee of U.S. Senate. And in a very well structured manner, the whole propaganda has been decimated, saying that calling them militant is not the right word. A, they were terrorists. B, the act they undertook was a terror act. And in as many words, the be it government of the United States, be it other state heads or government heads who have spoken to India, to External Affairs Minister, to Prime Minister, or have posted public condolence to India after the attack, has very categorically said this is a terror attack. So be it NYT or other such publications, if they try and soften their headlines, that is nothing but disservice to journalism, and that has been publicly called out.
Absolutely, that has been publicly called out by their own government. In fact, remember how this did strike that word militant and replace that with the terrorists, Rishabh?
Well, definitely. See, if you see, corrected, fixed it for an NYT was the post on social media, and very categorically they strike through a militant word and wrote bold and capital terrorist. And this is something that needs to be taught really well. A difference between gunmen, militant, lone rider, and terrorist. This was an act of terror, and with the way it has been carried out, identifying the victims, killing them, creating a fear psychosis, sending out a message of terror, that is something that was missing in the piece as well. Just by calling it a shooting incident, a militancy incident, is something that is basically helping the propaganda of the terrorist, quote unquote terrorist here, that that NYT is trying to do, and that is something that has been called out and very well be. Also, when these outlets write about Indian administered Kashmir, as they call it, or Pakistan occupied Kashmir is the right word, which they fail to mention in their stories. Even as per UN resolution, it is Pakistani forces who are illegally sitting in POK, and the first condition of the resolution says that Pakistani forces will have to vacate the POK, Indian forces will take over, and then referendum will take place. So all this Indian administered Kashmir, Pakistan administered Kashmir, this whole propaganda being played by Western media is something that needs to be called out now and in as many words.
All right, Rishabh, thank you very much for getting us the details. We'll keep coming back to you. Meanwhile, the members of UK Parliament have condemned the terrorist attack in Jammu and Kashmir's Pahalgam. Several UK MPs, Bob Blackman, Tamanjeet Singh Desi, expressed hope that the perpetrators behind the attack will be swiftly brought to justice.
Previously said, can I join him absolutely in condemning these terrorist attack in Kashmir? This country always stands shoulder to shoulder with other countries, in this case India, who suffer these horrific terrorist attacks, which are cowardly acts that we resolutely condemn, as he says, and those conversations are ongoing, as he will know, to provide the support that we can. And are there any British nationals affected? We will also provide that support to them as well. But can I thank him again for raising this?
But also, I was deeply saddened this week with the cowardly, deadly, shocking terrorist attack on innocent tourists in Jammu and Kashmir. The families of victims are very much in my prayers, and I sincerely hope that the perpetrators will be swiftly brought to justice.
And with that, we're slipping into a very short break. A lot more lined up on the other side. Stay on with us.